So we were able to link the production level with the variable nitrogen rate. Right. So just to go as an introductory slide, an effective nitrogen management would take in coordination the inputs and outputs from the system. Basically, what we're looking at here, and we want to improve the efficiency as much as we can. There are a lot of things that we can do in terms of management, and I'm not talking exclusively on rate, but in terms of management of timing, source, and basically the 4 R's that we can improve the efficiency of fertilizer and reduce the leftover in the field of nitrogen, for instance. So taking the sources of N that we have, residual soil nitrogen, which for our sandy soils is normally very low. So organic matter, also, most of Florida mineral soils is also low. About 20 to 50 pounds of nitrogen per each percent of organic matter. Nitrogen from irrigation water, that could be a source of nitrogen, but normally it's not the case. And fertilizer. We don't see nitrogen biological fixation in potatoes yet. Perhaps one day we can come up with something like that. So that's not included here. In terms of drains for nitrogen, leaching, denitrification, microbial tie-up. So those where the nitrogen could be not available to the plant. So I'm going to focus more on the rate and the timing, which is I see as a backbone of the research that we have done and open up for so placement. That was something that the growers have already changed over the years with the banning equipment. We pretty much don't hear much of broadcasting fertilizer. In rare cases. So that's a success story that the potato growers have about. And source, we saw about talking about source. We're talking about here mostly focusing on soluble nitrogen sources. You saw Christian saying about the short season potatoes. That is true. It's very fast, 100 days from planting to harvest. Growers would like to have that 75 days. We're working on that, but it's very fast. So nitrogen needs to be available right away when the plant is growing, and that can be a challenge if you don't adjust the timing. So when we started this project, and we consulted with the growers. And they were using a pre-plant nitrogen fertilization that was applied at fumigation. So we designed trials to accommodate that and to validate that point. Some trials at that. So we used to have about 50 pounds of nitrogen fertilizer at the pre-plant, followed by a second application at 20-25 days after planting, and then the tuber initiation. So we're talking about splitting 3 applications here. What is more intuitive, would be to move that pre-plant application to planting, trying to maximize the efficiency of fertilization. And that's kind of what our study went around over the years, and trying to identify in each one of these applications how much nitrogen we would need, and trying to balance out and focusing on the lowest amount possible. So here's the nitrogen uptake curve for potatoes around 350 pound CWT per acre yield. So we see a very rapid increase of nitrogen uptake around right after the emergence and between 60 days. So that's very important when we're defining the timing of application. So nitrogen needs to be in the root zone at that particular time, available to the plant to be able to uptake. So basically, when we split where the nitrogen in the plant is going, so it goes above ground around the 50 days, and then it starts translocating towards tubers during the bulking stage. So it goes to the top and then goes down. So nitrogen doesn't go straight to the tuber. So we need to build foliage, photosynthesis apparatus for later on that supply tubers. So when we look at the applications, it would make sense to have something very similar in the test, very narrow between planting and the tuber initiation, which is about 45, 50 days. When we move applications later on, after tuber initiation, that has an effect of stimulating plant growth. So plants tend to keep the foliage, and so actually that extends the growing season, which might not be desirable. It might increase yield if you're in the northern states like Idaho, or they have double of our production, but they're growing potatoes 130 days. So we don't have the luxury since we're harvesting towards beginning of the summer with the rainfalls. Just to have an idea how, these are examples of how we conduct these trials. So we look at the nitrogen at pre-plant, so what was happening, and the impact of rainfall during that period. Here's an example after the application of 50 pounds, at the fumigation. So we saw that increase of nitrogen in the soil, but after 6.2 inches of rain, most of the nitrogen would be gone. And so that would not be available for the plant, considering that uptake curve. And then for the other, here you see another spike of nitrogen. That's the emergence application. So we had 4 rates increasing. So we see that impact of the application rate in the soil of nitrogen. Of course, more nitrogen, more fertilizer, higher rate, higher nitrogen in the soil. So this is the ideal. We want to keep the nitrogen curve high as much as we can in the root zone, and we have the rain against us. And this is when we applied one of the trials that we did was comparing at the later application, at tuber initiation, 50 or 100 pounds. So we see also an increase of nitrogen. So is there a benefit of the third application go a little bit higher? So when we played without these combinations, so we're actually finding what would be the ideal combination for potatoes to keep that nitrogen in the soil high all the way during the season. Here's another example. Again, pre-plant fertilizer here at the fumigation in a year that we have a very low rainfall, so nitrogen stayed in the soil. So there is a great susceptibility to leaching, depending of the volume of rain that we receive. So considering, that, so you can minimize risk by bringing the fertilization close to planting. Some examples, looking yield response to the nitrogen rate. That specifically, these 2 tables specifically for the emergence application, where we range it from 0 to 150 pounds. For Atlantic, and here for Free-Lay 1867. So we could see linear response, in years that were very wet. In this case, for Atlantic, not much. So that's not total rate. This is just the rate applied at emergency. In some years, for Frito-Lay 1867, we saw some linear and quadratic responses sometimes, but always kind of the tendency of increasing uptake. And then looking at tuber initiation, we never saw any benefit of applying 100 pounds instead of 50. So meaning that it's necessary to have some nitrogen towards the end, but you might not need to go in a very high rate, And there's some situations, that might just justify when you have excessive rainfall throughout the season. So it might justify, and you finally can get. That's the last opportunity you have to get into the field. There are variations. We've been talking to growers that have fertigation capabilities, so they can split the third application. Instead of using the tuber initiation application, they split that fertilizer rate over 4 or 5 applications. That's okay, if it fits in them. So here's some highlights. Basically, what I just mentioned, the risk of rainfall to leach nitrogen and pre-plant applications. And then we start narrowing down the application for tuber for planting. So it seems that around 75, 100 and 150 pounds. Some other varieties, more efficient varieties, 85 to 110 pounds. So we start figuring out how much we need to apply in each one of the applications. But one thing we saw, over 250, we never saw any benefit of going over 250 pounds of nitrogen. Here's another example. That was to confirm, the application, the pre-plant application. So our thought was, can we get rid of the pre-plant application and start applying fertilizer at the emergence of the plant? So skip even the planting application. And the reason, the answer is no. If we don't put any nitrogen at the beginning, like we're showing here, we're already losing 30 bags per acre, in this case, very significant. So potatoes need some nitrogen right at the beginning, right there. And then you start understanding why growers had, the pre-plant application, and that to facilitate the operations, and and we have been talking to them. The closer you can get, the best. And hopefully, we can make some adaptations and have fertilizer hops in the planters, to really one single operation at that point. Same thing, for other varieties. Sometimes you see even an interaction between pre-plant application. So if you don't have any pre-plant, it becomes more important. You need to increase the rate at the emergence. So it is a game. It's a chess game that you got to play with this and with the rates and timing. So early nitrogen is extremely important for potatoes. And optimum nitrogen in emergence, 110 pounds for Atlantic, 150 for 1867, when soil nitrogen is not limited. All right, so that means I have 5 more minutes, right? 4 more minutes. Very good. So we validated all this with isotopes. Basically to see, isotopes tells us from each one of these applications what is the efficiency of that particular application. And for pre-plant fertilizer, 30 days before planting, it's only 11%. it's very low. Should we check if we're still on here? Right. So for pre-plant fertilizer, you're still 11%. And see, there's two applications for emergence and tuber initiation, 62%. This is outrageous. This is great. You know, corn is 45%. And that's because of that fast growth, you know. So, which makes timing extremely more important. So good?
Yeah, you're good.
Makes timing extremely important. Moving to the application to planting, so increase that pre-plant application to 18%, decrease a little bit, 44% for the emergence, and 62%. At the end, if you average all those, it's around 45%, you know, application. So this is very important to keep in mind. All right. So how we come up with the recommendation, you know? So all these trials that we conducted over the years, it's more than 28 trials, you know, the variability, you know, Bob mentioned about how hard it is to identify the variability of this. So we had to combine all these trials. And here's the average yield, and here's also for that particular yield, how much nitrogen these plants are uptaking. So around 346 bags to the acre, requiring about, and this is, requiring about on average 125 kilograms per pounds of nitrogen per acre. So this is not CWP. So as we increase, here on the bottom, you see, as we increase the yield, nitrogen uptake, which is right here, the entire plant also increased. And see this variability of, you know, yields and farms and years, you know, create that cloud of number. But we found a significant relationship. And that's kind of the backbone of the recommendation based on yield goals. We also evaluate the efficiency as we're increasing the nitrogen rate application, efficiency of fertilizer decreases, you know, so we put that in account as well. And here's the classical yield response for nitrogen. So if you look at the average, the peak, the highest response would be around 224-25 pounds of nitrogen per acre. So to tie it up with, you know, different fields, different conditions, so we come up with that relationship on potato yield, tuber yield, versus, and that's the uptake, the corresponding uptake line, the one that with the cloud points that I showed before. That's the same line, and then we incorporated the efficiency of the fertilizer. So we find this line here, which is as I increase the yield, I also increase nitrogen requirement. So let's say if a grower is averaging 400 bags, you know, per acre in the field, he would require the 250 pounds of nitrogen applied. And if there are fields that are not passing 300, if 200 or 300 pounds here, you know, 200 pounds of nitrogen would be sufficient for that field. So that's what, and that means that nitrogen is not a limiting factor for that particular production level. There might be other nutrients or physical or irrigation that might limit him. We included an economic analysis, which is probably out of whack right now, because this was done in 2020. We need to update. And kind of matched, the net return about 220 pounds of nitrogen per acre. And as we keep increasing, here's the average return per dollar spent in nitrogen. So as we increase that nitrogen application, so we decrease the return, after a certain point, after around here, about after 200. Anyway, all this is summarized in the publication that Gary and Christian and Tara helped me to craft. Thank you very much for your help. And basically, yeah, I think, if I have to put what's more important, timing or rate, they go hand in hand. Timing, if you get the right timing, you might find out that you can decrease the rate. So I'll put timing in the first perspective. Respect the distribution of nitrogen with the growth rate curves. And new targets, I think that's probably the new, we can start going towards to this new target. Citrus already have, and more data is coming, and with work with Lakesh and students, and we're looking at phosphorus, interactions with phosphorus and nitrogen, phosphorus and potash and sulfur. So there's the work is not done yet. So we want to look at the interaction of all these nutrients and see that, because there are interactions, and we need to refine nitrogen and other recommendations based in those interactions, and also considering irrigation factors as well. So a special thanks to the growers. This work were done in their fields. They open up. They were very, very thankful. From the agencies, FDEX and OAWP, they're very major. There were several funding agencies, several years of funding. The deans, Dean McClellan was a big supporter back in the days, and the Hastings Agriculture Extension team, they were fundamental in getting this work done.